Hello, this is Mark Tybee, and this series is entitled Healing Grief. And today we're looking at the subject, finding our way back home. Um, I've been a chaplain now for over 18 years, a hospice chaplain. And in those years of caring for others, families, as well as my own, I've come to recognize some things about grief that perhaps might be helpful to you. Uh, we've all heard of the expression, home is where the heart is. And when our heart is broken, there seems to be a disconnect. It is an emotional experience that hopefully does not happen very often in one's life. And because it doesn't happen that often, it tends to catch us unaware. I'm all for surprises, but I don't like being blindsided. Surprises tend to be more positive, but if you've ever been blindsided, that is, I'm truly caught unaware, it can really take you for a loop. And interestingly enough, even when we know that our loved one will not be with us much longer, for some reason or other, when the event happens, when they die, it's still, no matter how well we prepare, we just don't find ourselves ready. I remember talking to a man one day whose wife had died. She had been on hospice really for about a year. And he said to me, he said, I really was prepared for this, but now that it's happened, I just, I guess I've realized I just wasn't ready. You know, Oftentimes when we lose someone to death, we don't really know how to react. There is so much busyness in our culture. There's a memorial or a funeral planning, family, friends come in. We're busy. And when it's all been said and done, after the service is over and a week or two or three have passed, depending upon the depth of that relationship, and that really is the key, the depth of our relationship, you know, uh, we can't really categorize the depth of relationships just because it may be a grandparent. I mean, we know that our grandparents are going to pass away, and and then of course our parents and perhaps a sibling, and we just think that the younger the person is, the harder it's going to be. But truth be known, it's the depth of that relationship. There are a lot of people who had tremendous, deep, close relationships with the grandparent. And so, we can't really categorize really what is a deeper relationship or deeper category, of love than another. And so we come to this place to where time has passed and we may feel a little numb. One of the things that I really recommend here for you to begin is to resist isolation. It's not a good thing to isolate yourself. I tend to be somewhat of a uh, I'm not an eccentric. What's the other word? Well, you know what I'm talking about. So with my private time, I tend to pull away, maybe read or paint or go for walks. I have to kind of push myself to interact with others. And so it's very easy for me to withdraw. That's not a healthy thing. And so as much as it's difficult as it already is, that a loved one has now died, now you're actually having to force yourself to be around other people. One of the most important things that you can do is to tell the story of your loved one. What is the story? Well, it's something that you know and that you shared with that one that is no longer with you. And by sharing that with strangers, with other people that don't really know that relationship, when you start talking to them about that loved one, something comes up from the inside. You are reflecting, you're going back because you want to tell this person who did not know that relationship. You want to be able to inform them, of really what really happened and what that relationship was like and what that person really meant to you. You see, we can't really tell the story to family because most family, well, they know the story. That's the value of a grief group. getting together with 6, 7, 8 people, strangers for the most part. The one thing that they share in common is that one of their loved ones has died. It doesn't really matter whether it was a spouse or a parent or a sibling or even a child. They all have this one thing in common, that they have a hard time finding their way back home. Um, I've experienced the loss of my parents, my grandparents, and I know this may sound somewhat trite, but I've been blindsided a couple of times in losing um, a valued position, a job that just literally just kind of happened out of nowhere. And you think, well, how can you possibly compare the loss of a job to somebody who has died? Grief is grief. There are people that grieve over the loss of a pet, the death of a pet, as much as they would a person. And so, you know, I just wasn't really expecting myself to grieve like I did. In fact, a friend of mine said, Mark, I think you might be experiencing some PTSD. I thought, wow, is it that bad? But it just tore me up and wore me down, and I was experiencing depression and sleeplessness, and I was I was somewhat disappointed, to be honest with you. I wasn't expecting to really go through those kind of feelings and emotions regarding the loss of a job, but it was a grievous thing. So back to the idea of a group. When you get involved in a group, whether it's a number of people from your church or a social club or just gathering of friends, do this on purpose, purposefully. Call someone, get together, go out to lunch, invite a few people over, and let them know, I would like for you to come so I can really share with you my story with my loved one. And as you begin to tell them the story, chances are the feelings, emotions will come to the surface, and allow that to happen. Just humble yourself and allow yourself to happen. Get some tissues, because this is a big part of the healing process. We've heard the line, time heals all things. Well, time heals nothing. Time heals nothing. It simply provides a space, a time frame to suppress the reality of what has happened. Another thing is busy. I confess, my father died on Easter Sunday, 2009. On a following Monday, the next day, I saw all these shrubs that I had purchased just the week before, and I decided I need to get those in the ground. And so I wasn't really thinking about what I was really doing, but I was actually busying myself to get my mind off of what had happened. And there's really nothing wrong with that. I mean, honestly, we see that characterized a lot on TV shows, especially some of these detective police shows. A partner dies, and they just don't know what to do with themselves, so they throw themselves back into their work, and that happens with, doesn't make any difference what line of work you may be in. But we tend to want to throw ourselves back into busyness because we don't really want to be thinking about what has just transpired a day or two or three before. So time does not heal, and busyness only delays the inevitable. At some point in time, that pain is going to surface. I wish I could tell you that it won't, but it will. And it can surface in the most inopportune, inappropriate, unlikely places. It can show up in your work. What's really weird about grief is that if it's not tended to, if we're not proactive about it, it starts showing up in our attitude. Over time, we can find ourselves being short with coworkers. We're just not talking. They may not really even know, really what happened. But we just find ourselves, not talking, being short with them, sometimes even easily getting offended or getting into an argument. and they're scratching their head trying to figure out, what did I say? What did I do? And you don't recognize this, but these are symptoms of grief that are basically demanding expression. Yeah, our feelings, our emotions, they have to have a place to go. And the best place for them to go out is from the mouth. And by talking to people about this, talking to friends, talking, to a neighbor, talking to coworkers, your goal right now, if you have been grieving the death of a loved one for a year or even over a year, it's time. It is critically time for you to really start talking to others about the death of your loved one. So I hope in the short time that I've had you today, that you really kind of take time to examine your own heart and mind. Ask yourself, am I truly free? Have I truly grieved to the place to where I'm able to find my way home? That I just feel like, well, it's the closest thing to being normal, as you can recall. Home is where the heart is. And when our hearts are broken, there is a disconnect. And we're looking to reconnect. We're looking to come back to our life, to that place. Even though we love and miss that one who's no longer with us, we still have a life to live. We still have people to care about and to care for. And so do this, not only for yourself, but for those around you. And I know that you will be grateful that you did. Give him the opportunity to begin to show things to you. Don't be afraid. The things that you begin to see about yourself, the things that need to come to the surface to be released, are only those things that will eventually lead to healing. So God bless you, and I'll see you.